I had just set the tea tray down on the oak table I refinished with my own hands, the same table I bought when we moved into this house 31 years ago. I smiled at the thought of my late husband sanding its edges of our son running around it in circles when he was 5. But then came her voice sharp, clean, with a hint of amusement. You don't have to keep doing that, Evelyn. You're just a guest now. I turned slowly. My daughter-in-law Rachel didn't flinch. She wasn't joking. A guest, I repeated. She folded her arms. Well, I mean, you're not on the title anymore. And we do have our own way of doing things now. That was the moment the floor beneath my feet didn't just feel cold, it felt foreign. This house, these walls, the hallway I painted while pregnant with Brian, the backyard where I planted every rose bush in memory of my mother, the staircase that groaned in the exact same way since 1994. This was my home, and now I was a guest, not family, not mother, not matriarch, just a placeholder. I smiled politely, but inside something tore, not just from what she said, but from how easily she said it. As if I had never mattered. As if my life's work could be dismissed with a few clipped words. All I did was nod. Of course, dear. But that night, I sat in my room, the guest room apparently, and stared at the walls I once painted lavender for Brian's nursery. They'd since been repainted a dull grey, a cold grey, and I asked myself something I never imagined I'd have to. How do you fight to reclaim something you built when the people living in it think you're a stranger? What would you do if your daughter-in-law called you a guest in your own home? Let me know in the comments below, especially if you're watching from anywhere in the world. Just drop your city name and tell me, have you ever been erased from your own space? Do you think I should have spoken up right then, or stayed silent? And don't forget to subscribe if you've ever felt like you gave everything, only to be told you no longer belong. My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 67 years old. I was a school librarian for 31 years and a wife for 38. I raised one son, Brian. He was the kind of boy who collected rocks in his pockets, asked a million questions before bed, and cried when his science fair volcano didn't erupt. My husband David was a quiet man, an architect. He designed the bones of the house, but I brought it to life. He always said, "You turn blueprints into a home, Ev." We bought this property on Maple Lane the year Brian turned 7. It was a stretch we took out 2 loans. But I told David, let's grow old here. Let's build something that outlives us. And we did. Every corner of that house held a piece of me. The mosaic backsplash in the kitchen, I made it from broken tiles we found on a trip to Santa Fe. The front porch swing, David carved it for our anniversary. The bookshelf that wrapped around the living room, built from salvaged wood, I rescued from a library renovation project. The roses out front, each one planted in honor of someone we lost: my sister, his mother, our old neighbor, even our dog Murphy. That house wasn't just a structure. It was a story. Our story. When David died unexpectedly 7 years ago, I didn't leave. I couldn't. Instead, I stayed and opened the home wider. When Brian got married to Rachel, I welcomed her in with arms wide and heart open. I offered the downstairs suite. I said, make it your own. They were saving for a baby. Brian had just changed jobs. I wanted them to feel supported. I'll help with the mortgage, I told them. I'll cook. I'll watch the baby if you ever need to go out. Don't worry, I won't be in your way. Rachel smiled then, but it didn't reach her eyes. Rachel was precise. She folded towels in thirds, not halves. She color-coded everything. She labeled the spice rack. She had degrees from Yale and MIT and walked like the air around her should step aside. I was the kind of woman who used a notebook and called it a system. We were different, but I never thought that would be a problem. At first it was small things. She'd reorganize the kitchen overnight. She'd comment that I oversalted the chicken. She'd close doors I left open. She started calling me Evelyn instead of Mum. Said it was more modern. I brushed it off. She's just adjusting. It's not easy sharing space. She'll warm up. But warmth never came, only frost. Still I stayed. I told myself, this is our home. Families bend. That's what mothers do. Even when she began whispering to Brian in corners. Even when my favorite reading chair ended up in the garage. Even when she changed the Wi-Fi password and didn't tell me. I kept believing they just need time. I didn't realize I was the only one giving it. Until the baby came. Until I rocked little Emma to sleep, while Rachel scrolled her phone. Until I was up at 2 a.m. warming milk while they slept through it. Until Emma said her first word. Nana. And Rachel corrected her. No, that's Evelyn. Not Grandma. Not Nana. Just Evelyn. I laughed it off in the moment, but a part of me cracked. And like all old houses, cracks may start small, but they don't stay that way for long. It started with a drawer. One morning, I went to retrieve my tea infuser from the cabinet where it had lived for over 20 years. Gone. The entire cabinet had been cleared and reorganized. Labels had appeared. My belongings were gone, moved, boxed, or thrown out. I found my tea set in a bin in the garage next to old baby clothes and expired vitamins. I asked Rachel about it gently. Oh, I thought you weren't using it. I'm trying to streamline the kitchen. Streamline. A word that made a home feel like a shipping facility. Next, the pictures. David and I had kept a gallery wall in the hallway photos of Brian, growing up family vacations, my parents, our wedding photo, our 30th anniversary at the beach. One afternoon I came home from errands and the hallway was blank. I panicked, thinking something had happened. Oh, Rachel said casually, I'm redecorating. The hallway was cluttered. She'd wrapped them in newspaper and left the box by the basement door. You can store these somewhere, right? I lifted the box. David's smile looked back at me from beneath smudged glass. I didn't say a word, but that night I sat with the box in my lap and cried for an hour. Then came the birthdays. Mine passed without a card. Brian apologized later, saying they'd been so swamped. But I noticed the balloons and champagne when Rachel's birthday rolled around 3 weeks later. At dinner, I offered to clear the plates. Rachel smiled and said loud enough for the guests to hear, Oh no, Evelyn, you've already done enough today. Just enjoy your tea, our famous live-in guest. The table chuckled. I smiled too, outwardly, but I felt the floor tilt again beneath my feet. It was always the same formula, a comment disguised as politeness said in front of others to make me feel out of place, but said just sweetly enough that objecting would make me the problem. Even Brian started echoing her tone. Mom, I know you mean well, but we really need you to respect how Rachel runs the house. Rachel runs the house. The house I paid the down payment for. Still, I held my breath and held my tongue. I told myself that families change, that love looks different across generations. But it was getting harder to believe. At Emma's first birthday, the cracks widened. I spent a week making handmade decorations. I even sewed a little dress pale yellow with daisies the same color my mother once made for me. The morning of the party, I laid out the dress on Emma's bed. Rachel looked at it and shook her head. We're going with a brand shoot for this one. Professional photos. She'll wear the designer outfit I picked. I opened my mouth, closed it. Instead, I just nodded. I told myself it's not about the dress. It's about Emma being happy. But at the party, I wasn't seated at the family table. Rachel had arranged a long picnic-style setup in the backyard, with string lights and monogrammed napkins. Each place card had names in gold cursive: Rachel Bryan, Grandma Lily Rachel's mother, Uncle Tom, Aunt Shelby. I walked the length of the table. No Evelyn. "Oh," Rachel said, not looking up from her phone. "You're welcome to sit wherever. We just didn't know if you were staying the whole time." Staying? The house was mine. I built the garden where they placed the table. I planted the cherry tree under which Emma's cake sat. I hung those lights 10 years ago for my own wedding anniversary. But now I didn't even belong on the guest list. After the party, as I took plates inside and washed dishes alone, I caught a conversation between Rachel and her mother in the hallway. "It's been awkward lately," Rachel whispered. "She just lingers, like she doesn't know when to leave." Her mother laughed softly. "You've been more than patient. Maybe it's time to have a proper talk." That word again, leave. From the home where I raised my son. From the home where my husband took his last breath. From the home I had never once thought to call anyone a guest in. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty chair across from me, the one David used to sit in with the crossword puzzle in his hand and a cup of chamomile tea. I whispered out loud, like I used to when he was still here. "What would you do, David?" The house didn't answer, but in the silence I felt something settle, not anger, something quieter, resolve. The morning it happened, the house was quiet. Brian had taken Emma to the park. Rachel was in her home office, what used to be my sewing room, on a call about product launches or influencer deals or whatever it was she did with her 500K followers. I moved slowly, folding laundry, placing Emma's tiny socks back into the drawer, humming softly like I used to when Brian was small. That's when I noticed it, a large envelope on the side table by the stairs. My name wasn't on it, but Rachel's distinctive looping signature glinted in gold at the corner. Curious, I flipped it over. A printed invitation, heavy cardstock, floral embossed edges, soft lavender font. "Please join us in celebrating Brian and Rachel's official housewarming brunch. To our friends and extended family. A fresh start in our forever home. Housewarming, forever home." The date was this Saturday, and I hadn't been invited, not even told. I stood there, the envelope in my hand, heart thudding, not with anger, not yet, but with disbelief. I checked again. Maybe I missed my name. Maybe it was an oversight. Nothing. They were throwing a party in the home I helped build. In the very living room where I once read bedtime stories. And they were celebrating it as if I had never existed. Later that evening, I asked Brian gently. "I saw the invitation. He looked uncomfortable, rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, about that. Rachel thought it might be better to keep it simple. Just friends. You know our crowd. I've lived here for over 3 decades, Brian. He nodded. We just We wanted it to feel like a fresh chapter. Does that chapter not include me? He looked down, didn't answer. Rachel walked in, then wearing a soft beige linen dress and no trace of remorse on her face. We didn't think you'd enjoy it, Evelyn. It's mostly people our age. You might feel out of place. I stood there silent while Rachel poured herself a drink from the crystal decanter I received on my wedding day. You can take a break that day, she said. We'll handle everything. It's just brunch. You can relax. My own son didn't correct her, didn't object. He looked tired, or maybe just used to it. And suddenly I understood. It had never been an accident, not a misunderstanding. It was erasure, intentional, methodical quiet. That night I didn't cry. I sat in the attic, the one place Rachel hadn't touched, surrounded by boxes of memories, Brian's finger paintings, David's old briefcase, my wedding veil. My hands trembled, not from rage, but from something deeper, displacement. Not from a house, but from identity. I called my best friend June around midnight. She answered on the second ring. Evie, what's wrong? I didn't even say hello. I built this home, June. Every inch of it. And today, my own son said I should take a break while they celebrate it. June went silent. Then softly, maybe it's time you remind them whose foundation they're standing on. That night, something inside me shifted, not loudly, but like a door inside my heart had opened. And on the other side of that door, a version of me I hadn't seen in years. Not the mother, not the helper, not the guest. The woman who built and who could unbuild quietly, carefully, and with grace. The next morning, I woke early, before the birds, before the whirring of Rachel's Vitamix, before Brian's heavy footsteps creaked across the upstairs landing. I walked through the house in silence, no slippers, just skin against old wood. Every creak of the floorboard was familiar to me, not annoying, but comforting, like old friends greeting me. I moved from room to room, the hallway where I once bandaged Brian's knee, the corner of the den where David first told me he loved me, the kitchen tile with the faint chip in the shape of a crescent moon. They had redesigned everything, but they didn't know the bones. I did. That morning, I pulled out the original blueprints. David had framed them. I kept them in the attic, rolled neatly with his initials on the margin. I laid them out on my bed like sacred cloth. I traced each wall, each door, each stairwell with my fingers. This wasn't just a house, it was a signature. Mine, his, ours. They had remodeled the living room, yes, but I still held the deed. I still held every payment receipt, every renovation permit, every inspection, every insurance document, all in my name. I had never added Brian or Rachel to the ownership. I simply let them stay until now. I began gathering everything quietly. In the evenings when Rachel streamed her wellness webinars and Brian played with Emma, I scanned papers, emailed copies to myself, sorted folders into labeled binders. Original mortgage, property tax history, insurance, proof of inheritance, David's will, and my own trust. One night, Rachel knocked lightly on my door. Hey, Evelyn, just so you know, we're having an architect come by next week. We're thinking of knocking out the wall between the dining room and the den. Open it up. I looked up from the copier. That wall's load-bearing, I said. Calm, factual. She blinked. Oh, we'll have it checked. You won't be knocking out anything, I said, voice still quiet. You're not on the deed. There it was, the flicker. Her eyes widened just for a second. Then a tight smile. Brian didn't mention that. I know. She stared at me a beat longer, then left. I resumed scanning. The next day, I visited June. Her guest house sat behind her garden, shaded by wisteria and humming with bees. She served tea in porcelain cups with blue peacocks on them, David's favorite. You're thinking of leaving? She asked. I nodded slowly. Not leaving. Strategizing. Evie, you don't need to keep giving. You can choose you now. I'm not giving any more, I said. I'm documenting. I hired an attorney, a soft-spoken woman named Carolina, with sharp eyes and a sharper pen. She reviewed the deed, the trust, David's will. You're the sole owner, she confirmed, and there are no tenants, just family, no lease agreements, no shared equity. Legally, this is your house, entirely. She looked up at me. What outcome are you looking for? I didn't hesitate. Control, not revenge, not eviction, not spectacle, just restoration of voice, of dignity, of presence. I began writing again, a diary at first, then letters, to David, to Brian, to Emma. Things I couldn't say out loud yet. In the quiet of my room, I began to find myself again. I cooked only for myself, stopped folding laundry that wasn't mine, read in the garden instead of waiting in the kitchen. Rachel noticed. She started offering awkward thanks, started testing boundaries. Could you watch Emma while I run out? Do you mind folding the towels? Each time I simply said, I'm busy. 3 words, no explanation. She didn't know what to do with that. The house began to feel different. Still mine, but now a chessboard. I moved in silence, but every step had purpose. Because soon the brunch they planned would arrive, and so would the reckoning. Saturday arrived like a storm wearing pearls. The house buzzed with activity from sunrise. Rachel had hired a catering company, rented floral centerpieces, and stationed a professional photographer at the entrance. The doorbell rang every 4 minutes. Strangers filled the halls of the home I had once filled with bedtime stories and soup bowls. Voices I didn't recognize spilled laughter into corners where David and I used to dance on slow Sunday mornings. I wasn't invited, but I was present. I wore a grey blouse, subtle, crisp. I pinned my hair back with a barrette Brian gave me when he was 8, and I waited. At noon, sharp Rachel stood up to make a toast. She looked beautiful, poised in a linen dress and pearls, holding a champagne flute aloft. To new beginnings, she smiled. To building a forever home from love, vision, and partnership. This home is our sanctuary, our story. The guests clapped. Brian nodded beside her a little too fast, a little too tight at the jaw. Then she said it. I want to thank everyone who made this possible. My amazing husband, my incredible mother, and to all of you who helped us turn this blank canvas into something magical. Blank canvas. I stepped forward. The air shifted like a thread had snapped. I have something to say, I said gently. Heads turned, some confused, some smiling, politely unsure. Rachel froze mid-sip. Brian blinked. I know I wasn't on the guest list. I said, my voice calm, steady, firm. But since this house is still legally mine, I figured I could borrow a few minutes. Gasps, murmurs. I unfolded a paper. It was the deed. This house was bought in 1992, paid for in full over 27 years. My late husband, David, and I designed every room, painted every wall. This oak floor we're standing on, we laid it down ourselves after saving up for a year. Silence. Rachel's cheeks turned a quiet shade of pink. When Brian and Rachel moved in, I welcomed them. I opened every drawer, every room, every part of my heart. But something strange happened over time. I turned, slightly sweeping the room with my eyes. I started disappearing. A soft gasp from someone near the back. Photos came off the wall. My name off the mailbox. My place at the table. Replaced. I turned to Rachel, and then last week I heard the words, "You're just a guest here now." Dead silence. Rachel opened her mouth. I held up a hand, not angrily, but like a conductor pausing a symphony. Today, I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to remind everyone, especially myself, of one truth. You can repaint a house, refurnish the rooms, even reframe the story. But you cannot erase its foundation. Applause, hesitant at first, then growing. Rachel's expression fractured like a porcelain mask. I faced Brian. You're still my son. I love you. But love doesn't mean vanishing for someone else's comfort. Brian's eyes welled, his lips parted. Mom, No, I said softly. Let me finish. I turned back to the crowd. This isn't just about a house. It's about dignity, memory, presence. You want to build a forever home? I asked Rachel directly. Start by learning the history of the land you're building on. I walked out, not because I was defeated, because I was done playing small. Behind me, voices argued. One guest clapped. Another whispered, I didn't know. I stepped into the garden. My garden. The roses I planted still stood bright and defiant. I breathed in deep. The home was still mine, and so was I. The brunch ended in quiet chaos. Guests left early, some with awkward smiles, others offering gentle nods my way, avoiding Rachel's sharp glares. Brian lingered near the rose bush, his gaze pinned to the ground like a boy caught stealing. Rachel, she vanished. For hours the house was still. You could feel it bracing. That evening, Rachel knocked on my door. No camera-ready smile, no elegant tone. That was wildly inappropriate. Her voice was low, tight, brittle, like ice on the edge of thaw. I looked up from my notebook. What was... You hijacked our celebration. Our celebration, I repeated. In my home. She crossed her arms. Are we going to pretend we haven't let you live here out of kindness? Kindness, I stood. Calm, unflinching. I paid this mortgage. I own every tile beneath your designer shoes. I've paid taxes, repairs, insurance. You're not letting me live here. I've let you. Rachel's mouth moved, but no words came. And I'm done. The next morning, I filed the notice. Through my lawyer, Carolina, I sent a 30-day formal eviction letter. Not angry, not personal, just legal. It shook the house like thunder on glass. Brian came to me first. Mom, you're evicting us. I'm giving myself peace. But Emma will always have a place in my heart. But this, I gestured around the living room, this was never meant to become a stage for my disappearance. He sat on the edge of the coffee table. I didn't mean for things to go this far, but you let them. Silence. So what now? He asked. Now you both decide what your next chapter looks like. Somewhere else. Rachel didn't take it quietly. She posted vague messages on social media. Some people would rather cling to walls than build bridges. Family is what you choose, not what you inherit. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Carolina handled everything: paperwork, deadlines, notarized delivery. I simply packed the items I wanted to reclaim: David's records, the photo wall, my tea set, Emma's first drawing with my name in crayon. I placed them in a locked cabinet. On day 15, Rachel attempted a negotiation. You can't seriously expect us to find a place this fast. You had years to find respect. You'll manage a few weeks for relocation. On day 22, Brian brought Emma to see me. She was holding a book. Nana, she said brightly. I remembered. I read to her under the cherry tree. Rachel stood at the back porch watching. I didn't invite her closer. Brian finally spoke, voice almost a whisper. You're really doing this? No, I said. I've already done it. On day 30, a moving truck came. Rachel didn't say goodbye. Brian did. A long, quiet hug. No words. When the truck pulled away, the house was silent again, but this time not with sorrow, with space. I changed the locks. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table alone but not lonely, and for the first time in years, I exhaled. The morning after they left the house, breathed again. Not literally, but I could feel it. The kitchen no longer echoed with avoidance. The hallway didn't hold tension like a coiled spring. Even the light that fell through the bay windows seemed softer, less filtered, like the house itself had been waiting for me to return to it. I began with the little things. I bought new curtains, nothing extravagant, just soft linen ones with faint blue stitching. I took down the live, laugh, love decals Rachel had stuck above the fireplace and replaced them with a framed photo of David holding Brian as a baby. I found the old wind chimes David had hung on our second wedding anniversary and placed them back on the porch. The sound was light, gentle, like time exhaling. Then came the garden. It had been neglected, trampled by party tents and poorly placed chairs. But the soil was still rich. I rolled up my sleeves, pulled out weeds, pruned what had survived. By week's end, fresh lavender bloomed again near the walkway. The roses stood taller. The cherry tree looked proud. I hosted June for lunch under its shade. She brought fresh bread. I made butternut squash soup. You look taller, she said suddenly. That's because I'm standing in my own story again, I replied. We laughed. We didn't stop for a while. Carolina called with an idea. You know, a lot of women go through what you just did. Quiet erasure, emotional exile in their own homes. You could speak about it. I chuckled. I'm no public speaker, but you're a storyteller, she said. And you have a story people need to hear. So I started small, an online blog, 3 posts, titles like The Guest in the House I Built, Tea Belongs in a Real Cup, Why I Changed My Locks and Replanted My Garden. People responded, mothers, widows, retired teachers, even a few men who said they saw their own mothers in me. I wasn't trying to go viral. I was just trying to be heard. But one day, a woman named Layla wrote, I was sleeping on a couch in my daughter's basement. After reading your story, I stood up and called a lawyer. Another wrote, I used to think my silence was love. Thank you for showing me it could be strength instead. The platform grew, not massive, but steady, real. People didn't just follow, they shared. They sent stories, poems, recipes, photos of keys they'd just changed, and letters they'd never had the courage to send. And somewhere in all this, I began to laugh again, not just with June, not just politely, but real deep belly laughter that warmed the walls of my house like it used to. One Sunday I got a letter, no stamp, hand delivered, tucked under the doormat. From Brian, it simply read, I miss you. Emma asks for you every day. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd love a walk in the garden again sometime. I sat with the letter for a long time, and then I placed it on the kitchen counter, not in the trash, not in a drawer, but in the light. I wasn't done healing, but I was no longer hurting in the dark. I started hosting small gatherings, women who read my posts, neighbors I hadn't seen in years, friends of June. We drank tea in real cups. We sat on real chairs. We talked about being real again. Not perfect, not polite, just present. One evening I stood on my front porch, the chimes singing behind me, and whispered, David, we're still home. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like he heard me. It started with a letter, not from Brian, from Rachel, typed, formal, folded with precision. Dear Evelyn, I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing not to revisit the past, but to request a brief conversation. I understand the decision you made, and I respect your rights as the homeowner. However, I believe Emma's well-being and perhaps our collective healing may benefit from some sort of reconciliation. Would you consider meeting at your convenience? It was polite, distant, careful, but I could hear the undertone, desperation wrapped in diplomacy. I showed the letter to June. She's scared, June said, of losing access to the image she's curated, of losing Emma's connection to you, maybe even of what she's become. I nodded. Do I respond? That depends, June said. Do you want peace or do you want closure? I invited Rachel to tea, not out of obligation, out of clarity. She arrived not dressed in linen and pearls, but in jeans and a cardigan. No camera, no performance, just eyes that looked tired. Thank you, she said, for seeing me. I poured tea in silence. She didn't touch it. I was wrong, she began. No excuses, no revisionist history. I treated you like a fixture, a convenience. I pushed you out of your own story, and I told myself I was entitled to it. I waited. Brian's been seeing a therapist, she added softly. So have I. I looked at her. She looked different. Not just physically, something inside, humbled, or perhaps shaken enough to listen. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want Emma to know her grandmother, and I want her to know the truth about how this house came to be, about the strength that built it. That night, I sat in the garden and stared up at the stars, and I made a decision, one that would not be popular, one that would open the floodgates of opinion. I called Carolina the next morning. I want to restructure the trust, I told her. You're putting Brian back on the deed. No, I said. I'm naming Emma as a future co-owner at age 25. This house, this history should be hers if she wants it. Not as inheritance, as legacy, as story. Carolina paused. Are you sure? I'm sure. And Rachel, she'll have no say, no access. but she'll know. When I published a post about it, the response was immediate. Thousands of comments. Divided. You're a saint, too generous. She doesn't deserve a second chance. You're smarter than all of us. I'd never forgive what she did. You're giving the next generation a better shot. Respect. Even June hesitated. You know this will spark debate. Good, I said. Let them talk. Let them choose their side. I've already chosen mine. Rachel and Brian accepted the terms. They signed the new trust agreement in silence. Emma was too young to understand, but she drew me a picture that day, 3 stick figures under a roof labeled home. My name was in a heart. That night, I stood on the back porch, the stars above me, the house behind me, and the future resting in hands not yet ready, but one day strong enough. It was a Sunday afternoon in October. The wind was just starting to bring in the chill, and the cherry tree had begun to turn. I was sitting on the porch reading when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I didn't look up right away. Something told me I didn't need to. The steps were heavy, hesitant, familiar. Hey, Mom. It was Brian. Older than I remembered, or maybe just quieter. He held a bag of groceries and a paper bag shaped like bakery bread. Emma wanted to bake cookies with you. She said it's a Nana thing. I smiled softly. Is she here? She's with Rachel. I thought maybe we could talk first. I nodded. Of course. We sat in the kitchen, the same place I used to braid his hair before school, the same table where he once cried over geometry and first heartbreaks. He placed the bread down. We didn't speak for a long time, and it wasn't awkward. It was earned silence, like our hearts had needed this room before words could live in it again. I've read everything you've written, he finally said. Every post, every sentence. And he exhaled. I had no idea how much I let happen, how absent I was while you were being erased. I didn't flinch. I didn't rescue him from the discomfort. You didn't see me, I said, because she didn't want to, and you let that be enough. Tears welled in his eyes. I was scared to choose. You didn't have to choose. You just had to remember I existed. He reached across the table, not to hold my hand, just to close the distance. Thank you for still letting me be in Emma's life. She's part of my life, I said. That door will never close. But I won't open the same door twice for someone who slammed it shut the first time. Understand? He nodded. I'm not asking to come back. Good, I said with a hint of a smile. Because this house finally fits me again. We both laughed lightly, like old music replaying for the first time in years. Later that afternoon, Emma arrived. She ran into my arms like no time had passed at all. Guess what I brought? She grinned. She pulled out a wrinkled piece of paper. Another drawing. This one showed me her and Brian, 3 people holding hands under a big tree. In the corner she'd written, Home, Love Not Walls. I didn't need to ask where she heard that. Brian looked away, smiling. We baked cookies, real butter, no substitutions, just like I used to. We sang songs, laughed. Emma spilled flour everywhere and called it Grandma Glitter. Rachel didn't come in. She waited in the car. From the window, I saw her looking toward the house with something in her expression that looked almost like peace. Not friendship, not closeness, just recognition of who I was, of what she couldn't take from me. As Emma packed up, she whispered, I want to live with you when I'm big. I kissed her forehead. You'll always have a key, sweetheart. Always. When they left, I stood at the porch. Brian turned and waved once. So did Emma. The wind rustled the cherry tree behind me, and I whispered to no one, to everyone. Some roots go deeper than silence. If you've listened all the way through, then maybe, just maybe, you saw yourself in this story. Maybe you're the mother who stayed quiet a little too long. Maybe you're the daughter who lost her voice inside someone else's home. Maybe you're the child, now grown, wondering how you missed what was right in front of you. Or maybe, just maybe, you're the one finally ready to say, I deserve to exist in the home I built. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been erased inside your own family? Have you ever given everything only to be told you're too much, too old, or too inconvenient? Did someone move into your story and try to write you out of it? Then I want to hear from you. Leave a comment right now. Tell me your city, your story, even just your name so I know you're real. Say I'm still standing, or they called me a guest. But I built the home. And if this story made you feel seen or stronger, or even just less alone, hit subscribe. Because this story may be over, but our voices aren't. There are more stories to tell, more women to reclaim their place at the table, more silences to be broken. This isn't just a video, it's a movement. And you're part of it now.